What exactly does launching workshop in an upper elementary classroom look like? Well, in this video, I am sharing just that. If you're new here, I'm Rachel Vincent and I share tips on running effective and efficient classrooms so that you can get more done and still have time to teach. Just to clarify what I mean by workshop, I generally mean the small group time where you want to pull students for small group instruction and the rest of your class is doing something else. This tends to happen after your whole class lesson. So when I use the word workshop, that's really what I mean. Your small group time, center time, rotation time, whatever you call it in your classroom, I'm talking about when you are teaching a small group of students and the rest of your class is doing something else. I typically like to start around the second full week of school introducing my students to this workshop model. That first week, there's just so many other things you're needing to teach your students. But as you start to teach content to your students at the beginning of the year, this is when you can begin to slowly introduce your students to your workshop model. This is not the time when you want to actually begin your small group teaching and instruction. Because if you do that, you're going to lose the rest of your students. You want to make sure that you go at a slow pace where you are slowly introducing them to how it works and you are there to reinforce the behaviors you want to see and correct the behaviors that need to be corrected. Sometimes you will have other teachers and administration who will want to rush you through that process. But remember, the slower you go, the easier it will be to catch up later. Go slow to go fast later. If you really build that foundation at the beginning of the year with mini lessons on how things work in your classroom and really practicing those routines and procedures that involve your math and reading and writing workshops, you will be able to catch up that time later when your students are fully functioning. Your reading lessons or writing lessons or even math lessons for your first content days should be procedural and routine lessons. You can, of course, include easier skills that don't require a whole lot of teaching and learning, reviewing previous grade standards, but the majority of your lesson should be focusing on practicing those routines and procedures for your reading, math, or writing workshops. For instance, some of your lessons can be things like how to use the classroom library, how to do a certain center or rotation, how to complete independent work, how to do a math game, anything that you want students to do regularly while you are teaching. Those are the things you want to have your students practicing while you're there to help guide them to doing it the way you expect them to do it in your class. Voice levels, all those different things are great lessons to be teaching at the beginning of the school year when you are trying to introduce workshop. Even if the beginning of the school year has passed for you and you are several weeks into it, you can take some of your lesson time to teach those routines and procedures for your workshop. So what are the other students doing when you are teaching in a small group? Well, honestly, that really just depends on you as the teacher and where it works for you. I have done it many ways, and some years I actually do all these ways. One way is to actually have centers where your students rotate to different parts of your room and do different tasks there. I find in upper elementary that doing it that way is a little bit more difficult because first of all, we tend to have smaller rooms than primary, but we also have bigger students than the younger kids. And so having them actually move around the room is a little more difficult. So a way around that is to, instead of having students move around the room, the task moves from group to group. We do this a lot during our math workshop where they might be working on a game at one group and then a practice sheet at another group. And then when it's time to rotate, the students don't rotate, but the activity rotates. There are years where this will work beautifully. You will also have years where this doesn't work. I had a group of students that I tried multiple times to do a math rotation like I described, where the activity rotates, and it was just so loud and got way out of hand that I know the students who were doing those activities weren't learning, and I couldn't effectively help the students in my small group. So we nixed that idea, and instead of doing rotations, we just did an independent work time where they worked on something they could do independently. And then if they finished that, they went on to a technology time, which in our school is Dreambox that we use for math. That way I could work with my small groups of students while everybody was working independently. And then when I finished my group and sent them off to work independently, the next group of students could come to me. And it was just a very simplified process, and it just worked better because I knew everyone was able to learn during that time. The next thing that works really well, and I do this with our ELA block, I did this all of last year and it worked wonderfully, and I will continue to do it, is instead of having reading and writing centers or tasks that rotate, we do a must-do, may-do list. And when it is time for me to have small group instruction on the board, I display the must-do, may-do list. And so at the beginning of the year, or the beginning of launching our reading workshop, we work through what does the must-do, may-do list, and we talk through and practice through students realizing they are to complete the must-do list in order, getting those tasks done, and when those are done, then they can choose from the may-do list of items to do when they are not meeting with me. Last year was the first time that I really used a must-do, may-do list with my 4th graders, and it worked wonderfully. There was a lot of upfront teaching that I had to do and checking in with my students because most of them, it was their first time using a must-do, may-do list, but it is something that I will continue to use this year and in years going forward. Leave this emoji in the comments if you have ever used a must-do, may-do list with your students. The important thing to remember when launching your ELA and math workshop procedures is give your students time to learn the task before you begin pulling students. I know I said this earlier, but I can't stress the importance of it. So typically the first week that we're launching, I don't pull any students. I am monitoring, moving around the room, making sure students are on task, doing what they're supposed to be doing, following the procedure that we have set in our classroom. And then maybe the second week of launching, I might begin pulling 1 or 2 students. Maybe I need to do some assessments for students. Maybe I just want to check in with students every now and again, so that some of my time I'm pulling students and the rest of the class is learning, they can't interrupt. But then the other part of that time, I'm still checking in with the rest of the class, making sure they know what to do. And then I began to slowly release and begin to pull students, maybe 1 group on the first day, maybe 2 groups the next day, whatever our schedule allows, to slowly begin to work that, but constantly checking in with the rest of the class, making sure they're on task and doing what they're supposed to be doing. Keep in mind that you're gonna want to revisit some of those procedural lessons with your students after long breaks, or when your class as a whole are beginning to not quite remember what to do. We know we have those times of the years where it feels like they forgot everything you've taught them. So go back to those. What kind of voice level do we do? How do we make sure we're turning in our work? Those kinds of procedure lessons that help your classroom run more smoothly. Even after you have taught your students these lessons and they have started working well, there are times when our students just get chatty. Check out the video that's on your screen now, where I share some tips on how to quiet a noisy classroom. I'll see you over there.